In the day's other lead story, the government is girding tonight for a new legal battle on its second try at a travel ban. The new order issued today again targets a group of mostly Muslim nations, but it makes critical changes in a bid to try to avoid the issues that led the courts to block it. Jeffrey Brown begins our coverage.
President Trump signed the original ban at the Pentagon after just a week in office. Today's signing was done in private, with only a single still photo released. It fell to cabinet members to make the announcement, starting with Secretary of State Rex Tillerson.
President Trump is exercising his rightful authority to keep our people safe. As threats to our security continue to evolve and change, common sense dictates that we continually reevaluate and reassess the systems we rely upon to protect our country.
Unlike the original order, this new one removes Iraq from the original list of 7 nations whose citizens are barred from entering the U.S. Keeps out Syrian refugees for 120 days instead of indefinitely, and drops any explicit exception for Christian and other religious minorities in Muslim nations. In addition, it's made explicit this time that valid visa holders and foreign nationals with green cards securing their residence in the U.S. are not included in the ban. The first order was effectively halted by federal courts within days of being issued. White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer said today in an audio-only session that it's now being revoked.
We continue to maintain that the order was fully lawful, but there are some legal hurdles that we'd have to potentially cross in terms of enjoyment and things like that. So it was discussed with the president Saturday, and he made a decision that this is how he wanted to proceed.
Among other things, federal judges said the original order cited no evidence of an actual threat. The new directive says the FBI is pursuing 300 terrorism-related investigations of individuals admitted as refugees. Officials also hope to avoid the chaos at airports when the original order took effect, as people in transit were detained, delayed, and expelled without notice. Homeland Security Secretary John Kelly.
We are going to work closely to implement and enforce it humanely, respectfully, and with professionalism, but we will enforce the law. So there should be no surprises, whether it's in the media or on Capitol Hill.
But opponents showed no signs of backing down. Washington State Attorney General Bob Ferguson, who successfully challenged the first order, spoke this afternoon in Seattle.
The chaos it inflicted around our country, you all saw it. It wasn't right. I certainly hope they take away numerous lessons from this experience, but if they don't, they can expect to see us challenging future executive orders as well.
For now, pending court action, the new order is set to take effect March 16th.
Well, if you look at the two of them side by side, this one is very different in the way it's packaged and put together. It reads like a legal brief rather than like a traditional executive order. It's filled with with citations to statutes. It's filled with factual assertions that the Ninth Circuit said it was lacking, and so and it also goes very specifically point by point through the things that the Ninth Circuit hypothesized could cause a due process issue. So it really it's tailor-made to the Ninth Circuit's decision, and I think this order, if it were challenged in the Ninth Circuit, which would be the most activist judicial venue for it, I think it'll survive. And of course, if it survives in the Ninth Circuit, it'll survive anywhere else too.
Neil Katyal, will it survive? Well, what do you see?
Oh, it won't survive. I think Chris is just about as right this time as he was last time on January 30th when he said, quote, Trump has rock-solid legal authority. These cases are losers. He was wrong then. He's wrong now. He is right that this reads like a legal brief, but it reads like a bad legal brief. It ignores what Congress has said in 1965 in its Landmark Act, which is you can't discriminate on the basis of nationality. And to attack the Ninth Circuit as being activist, as he did, is, I think, really the wrong way to go. It echoes what President Trump said about so-called judges and so on. Every time they lose a case, they disagree. But these are rock-solid American values that the challengers are standing up for.
One of the challenges had been on constitutional grounds. In this case, is it still a Muslim ban the way it was before, given the change in language?
It is. There's some change in this new executive order. It does say we don't intend to discriminate against Muslims, but the Supreme Court has been very clear that just because the government says that, they can always say we don't intend to discriminate on the basis of religion. You have to go back and look at the history of this, and if it's a pretext for discrimination, as this sure looks like, then it's going to fail in the courts for that reason.
Well, what about that, Mr. Kobach? That the Muslim issue specifically, and then also that this new law, this new order still distinguishes by nationality.
Well, if you look at the text of the order, it's quite clear that it has nothing to do with religion. Indeed, it says that special protection in our refugee program is afforded to those who are members of minority religions, and it says including in cases where the minority religion is the Muslim religion. If you look at the selection of the 6 countries, you've got dozens of other countries around the world that are majority Muslim countries that are not selected for special treatment. And furthermore, this new order calls for a review of all of the countries on the planet to see if they too should be added to the special list. So to characterize this as a Muslim ban is just simply false. It is based on facts about these 6 countries that make them hotbeds of terrorism, and those facts are listed in the order. As for Neil's point about somehow this being against what Congress has said, I would direct him to the United States Code, Title 8, Section 1182F, which says the president may, if he finds the entry of certain aliens detrimental to the interests of the United States, he may suspend or bar the entry of those aliens. That's exactly what the president did. The statutory grounds for this are very strong. That's why the challenge had to be based on a due process constitutional ground, and so that's what we really should be debating. Can they make a constitutional challenge on this one?
Let me, Neil Katyal, that in part goes to this attempt this time around to fill in the security justifications, right?
So 2 things. First of all, Chris isn't reading to you the whole statute. First of all, there's a later statute passed in 1965, 13 years after the one he read, and this says, quote, no person shall receive any preference or priority or be discriminated against in the issuance of an immigrant visa because of that person's nationality. That's later. Then the other part of that law that he read, Section 1182, Congress later said that in order to ban someone on the basis of terrorism, you have to have reasonable grounds on an individualized basis. But that's not what the president did
Let
here.
me just ask you briefly, though, how much doesn't it come down to how much deference the executive is granted when it comes to national security and immigration
Sure,
issues?
and I used to stand up and defend the United States on national security grounds all the time. This one is a very hard one to defend because there isn't the evidence that you need this now. Indeed, the evidence that Chris is referring to that was in the executive order is from 1979 and 1984. So, the idea that you need this magically now, is, I think, a very hard argument for the courts to accept, particularly given the history of this particular ban. This has been a Muslim ban from the start.
Chris Kobach, what's your response?
Well, the description in the executive order is not from 1979 or 1983. It talks about conditions on the ground in those 6 countries right now. I would also add that since 9/11, we've had 53 terrorists from those 6 countries either arrested or convicted of terrorism-related crimes who have entered using those visas from those countries since then. So this is a very present threat right now. And so, again, the statutory grounds are very strong. I think Neil has to admit that the debate about this is there a due process violation? And the Ninth Circuit kind of had to bend over backwards and imagine hypothetical cases where somebody might be denied their day in court. But this order says, look, you're going to get your day if you're in the United States illegally. You're still going to be able to make your claims in front of an immigration judge. And so I think it's just going to be a much harder lift for the attorneys trying to challenge this. Will they challenge it? I'm sure they will.
Okay, we're out of time. But Neil, harder to challenge, but the challenges will come, in a word, right?
And they're not hard. As President Trump says, see you in court.